And as I said, thank you very much for joining us today. We organised this press conference in the context of the next part of the CAP negotiations after protest in Lisbon on Monday, which was organised by one of our member organisations. We wanted to give the opportunity to farmers to really take the floor and explain why for them this CAP is not fit for purpose for farmers, for citizens and for the planet. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 5 speakers today. We'll have 3 to 5 minute presentations from each of the speakers. First will be Attila from Ecoruralis in Romania and a member of ECVC's coordinating committee. Then we'll have Andoni from COAG-EHNE-BIZKAL in Spain and the ECVC coordinating committee as well. Afterwards, Morgan Odi from La Confédération Paysanne in France and also a CC member from ECVC. We'll then invite Pier Francesco to give a perspective from the youth articulation of ECVC and his organisation ARI in Italy. And then Adélia will speak on behalf of CNAAL, a Portuguese member who organised the demonstration in Lisbon on Monday. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Attila. Attila, you have around 3 to 5 minutes, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alisha. I hope everybody can hear me well. My name is Attila Szocs, and I'm a peasant farmer from Romania. I'm president of Ecovuralis, which is a national association of peasant farmers. And I'm also, as Alisha said, coordination committee member of the European coordination via Campesina. We welcome your interest in this debate and our demands as small-scale peasant farmers in this ongoing common agricultural policy reform discussions. Because again, we are facing deep disappointment in how we observe the new CAP is being shaped. And I'm saying again, because we witnessed how the current CAP directly contributed to the rapid disappearance of small-scale family farmers all over the EU. And it accelerated land concentration and also the grabbing of land and public funds, which is done by large industrial enterprises and also non-farming actors. And it also deepened these precarious social and environmental conditions that us as small farmers and farm workers face. And this current CAP failed to address the crucial issue of supporting the next generation of farmers. So the millions of small-scale and medium-scale farmers who, as we all know, still make up the vast majority of farmers across the European Union, play a fundamental economic and social and territorial role because we have a diversified production when we ensure food quality and consumer health, and we protect this environment in this huge debate of cooling the planet. So once again, this CAP, as we see, is being pushed forward. This reform is being pushed forward in spite of the fact that it does not adequately respond to the demands of society. And this reform does not provide tangible solutions to the challenges facing farmers and the rural world in Europe. It doesn't touch on the current social and environmental and climatic challenges. So we can truly say as ECVC that overall this is not the CAP that we want. And this is not the CAP that small farmers and peasant farmers need. So we evaluate that this CAP reform will not meet the objectives of the Green Deal, and it will not be convergent with the biodiversity and farm-to-fork strategies. And most importantly, the current CAP does not meet its own 9 objectives that it pushed out as a reform itself. Because we see that there's a watering down of such valid proposals that we put forward towards the new CAP that could provide more fair income to farmers, that could ensure generational renewal, that could safeguard landscapes and develop rural areas. But nonetheless, as Alisha was also mentioning, we mobilize and we keep our voices and demands strong, and we push for the implementation of what is still possible as solutions and as proposals, so that we don't end up with the completely useless CAP and we don't see the continuation of business as usual. So we advocate for the increased support for small-scale farmers through the improvement of the common market organization regulations to ensure that farmers have stability and fair prices. We see this as a crucial issue for the CAP reform, because if farmers do not receive fair prices for their agricultural production, then the other objectives of the CAP and the farm-to-fork strategy will be impossible to achieve, and we risk of having a CAP that is emptied out from its purpose. So we demand the proper addressing and mitigating also of the concentration of land, which is proportional, as we see with concentration of subsidies in the hands of ever fewer and bigger landholdings. It is disastrous that current area-based payments benefit large commodity producers and also a lot of speculative non-farming actors that drive up land prices, that encourage land concentration and make it harder for new entrants to access land. Also, as we heard the Commissioner Wojciechowski recognize that EU lost 4.2 million farms. So between 2005 and 2016, 1/4 of the European farms have died out, have disappeared, and most of them are under 5 hectares. And some of the challenges are increased land concentration and inequality of the CAP support that particularly contributed to the disappearance of these farms. So moreover, many farmers are categorized as too small to access CAP aid, but these are the farmers who are feeding Europe. We are feeding Europe. For example, in my country, in Romania, we are almost 4 million peasant farmers that we produce food, and we distribute it mostly through short food chains and through regional territorial markets. But largely, we are neglected by the CAP. CAP subsidies in Romania have only been aiding 800,000 beneficiaries from this almost 4 million. So it is imperative to have a better distribution of aid through compulsory application of the degressivity from 60,000 euros and capping at 100,000 euros as a compulsory application, and also the compulsory application of the small farmer scheme. So not lastly, it is high time to adopt social conditionality. It's a soundbite and the discussion that is ongoing in the CAP. And we need to apply social conditionality immediately for the CAP aid recipients. And we need to have stipulated that CAP subsidies can be retracted in the event of serious infringements of social issues. Further on, so thank you so much for listening to these disappointments, but also this challenge that we want to highlight. And I want to let my colleagues to give details on the many important demands that ECVC is outlining. And I do want to stress that we are in a very crucial moment of the CAP negotiations where we need to focus on safeguarding whatever we can for small farmers. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Attila. And I just remind the journalists that are with us, if you want to ask questions, please either raise your hand or put them in the chat. We'd be very happy to hear from you. Next, I'd like to give the floor to Andoni García to give us a little bit more information on the points that Attila raised.
Sí, buenos días a todas y a todos. Gracias por acudir a esta rueda de prensa. Soy Andoni García, también agricultor en el País Vasco, miembro del Comité Coordinador de Vía Campesina Europa, de COAG-EHNE-BIZKAL. Estamos en un momento importante, aunque realmente el análisis que hacemos, que ha hecho mi compañero Attila, es un análisis muy duro de la propuesta de la PAC que tenemos encima de la mesa, pero en este momento también en el trílogo es importante las medidas que se puedan tomar en lo que queda, al menos para hacer de esta PAC un poco menos mala, ¿no? Entonces nos estamos jugando en lo que queda algunas cuestiones que queremos destacar, que son puntos mínimos con los cuales ECVC, Vía Campesina Europa, reclamamos que se resuelvan en el trílogo. Algunos de ellos tienen que ver con medidas de regulación de los mercados. Sí que para nosotros hubiera sido más que importante que se hubiera profundizado en muchas medidas del control de la producción, de instrumentos para controlar la producción, para distribuirla en más regiones y en más productores en Europa. Está dándose un proceso de uberización del campo, se está dando un proceso de industrialización de la agricultura, dirigiéndola hacia modelos industriales, modelos de agronegocio que destruyen directamente a los pequeños y medianos agricultores, y sin instrumentos de regulación, sin limitaciones a la entrada de esos fondos de inversión, pues día a día la agricultura en Europa va a acabar siendo mucho más pasto de esos intereses industriales que no son los intereses y los objetivos que se plantean en la PAC, que se plantean en el Pacto Verde Europeo, en la Estrategia de la Granja a la Mesa y Biodiversidad, y que la sociedad europea y los pequeños y medianos agricultores estamos demandando. En el trílogo hay un elemento que consideramos importante y es la posición del Parlamento Europeo. Pedimos que se apoye esa posición acerca del artículo 188 bis, que en el cual se plantea muy claramente que las producciones que vienen de fuera de la Unión Europea cumplan con las normativas sobre pesticidas que los agricultores en Europa tenemos. Nosotros queremos ir más lejos y es que realmente las producciones que vienen de fuera de la Unión Europea cumplan con el conjunto de las normativas que tenemos. Sin embargo, este artículo y esta posición del Parlamento nosotros vemos muy importante que se apoye, que el Consejo en el trílogo lo apoye y por lo tanto tengamos una medida que inicialmente podría ser importante para abordar la propia situación. Como ha dicho mi compañero, también planteamos que de una manera obligatoria haya límites en los 60.000 límites en las ayudas, 60.000, que haya una redistribución obligatoria y que haya un régimen dirigido a los pequeños agricultores, el régimen de pequeños agricultores, sobre todo porque nos tememos que si estas medidas no son obligatorias, los países pueden dejar a miles de agricultores pequeños fuera de las ayudas y esto sería un gran desastre para la agricultura en Europa.
Thank you very much, Andoni. Some very important and interesting points there. I'd next like to give the floor to Morgan Odi. The floor is yours, Morgan.
Bonjour, je vais parler en français. Je m'appelle Morgane Odi, je suis paysanne en Bretagne. Je suis membre de la Confédération Paysanne et je fais partie du comité de coordination de CVC au niveau européen. Alors, on a tenté de nous présenter cette PAC comme plus verte, plus écologique, plus environnementale. Mais en fait, aucune mesure ne vient réellement permettre d'accompagner les paysans et les paysannes vers des changements de pratiques, vers plus d'agroécologie. Ainsi, les conditions ne sont nullement en place pour pouvoir réaliser les objectifs du pacte vert et de la stratégie de la ferme à l'assiette. Je vais vous donner un exemple, c'est celui de la baisse de l'utilisation des pesticides de synthèse. L'objectif, c'est moins 50% pour 2030. Et pour nous, paysannes et paysans, c'est aussi un objectif important parce que nous sommes les premières victimes en termes de santé des ravages faits par les pesticides chimiques. Donc, les éco-régimes vont-ils permettre d'atteindre cet objectif? Le fonctionnement des éco-régimes reste très proche de celui des paiements verts dans la PAC actuelle. Et on sait que seulement 5% des fermes européennes ont dû améliorer leurs pratiques environnementales pour y avoir accès. Le ministre français de l'Agriculture, Julien de Normandie, a déjà affirmé que plus de 70% des fermes françaises pourront toucher les aides, la partie des aides liées aux éco-régimes sans avoir rien à changer. La baisse de l'usage des pesticides n'est même pas une condition stricte pour obtenir le paiement des éco-régimes. Dans ces conditions, que ce soit 20% ou 30% des aides totales de la PAC qui soient soumis aux éco-régimes n'aura malheureusement qu'assez peu d'impact. Il est donc déterminant que lors du prochain trilogue soit au moins adopté l'article 188 bis pour en finir avec la tolérance accordée aux importations agricoles contenant des pesticides interdits dans l'Union européenne. En effet, il est impossible de demander aux paysans et aux paysannes européennes d'améliorer leurs pratiques sans apporter une meilleure protection face aux importations agricoles qui ne respectent pas les normes sociales et environnementales européennes. La dépendance aux pesticides n'est pas une dépendance technique, c'est une dépendance économique. C'est pour produire à des prix plus bas que les paysans et les paysannes européennes sont, dans le cadre économique actuel, sont dépendants des pesticides. Et donc, si on ne stoppe pas le dumping des importations qui ne respectent pas ces mêmes normes, il n'y a que très peu de chances pour qu'on puisse atteindre les objectifs du pacte vert. Donc voilà, pour nous, c'est une condition minimale si on veut respecter les objectifs du pacte vert et de la stratégie de la ferme à l'assiette, il faut au moins que ça se soit adopté lors du prochain trilogue. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Morgan. Again, if there are any questions or anybody wants to raise their hand to ask a question, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Next, I would like to invite Pier Francesco to give the perspective of our youth articulation, something that is a very important topic in the CAP negotiations for ECVC. Pier Francesco.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Pier Francesco Pandolfi de Rinaldis. I am an agricultural worker and technician and willing to be farmer in Italy. Well, from the ECVC youth group perspective, we want to underline that this CAP is not only lacking ambition regarding youth-related policies, but could really represent an obstacle for young farmers in the future. The share of 2% of CAP budget allocated to young farmer is too low, and we see insufficient political and economic focus on new entrants in the new CAP. We firmly believe that new farmers should be a priority for European Union, since in Europe we know that only 11% of all farm holdings are run by farmers under 40. For example, in Italy, in my country, this percentage falls down to 4.5% only. Europe desperately needs more farmer and new entrants. But on one hand, we see that this economic measures are insufficient, and on the other hand, this new CAP reform is not giving the importance that deserves the market issue and the fair prices for a decent life for farmers and especially young farmers. So we need to address in this CAP reform both of these aspects. The first one, the fact that young farmers, young people needs, first of all, a settling in grants fairly and proportionally allocated in all European countries, and a digressive income support from the start, from the new installation onwards. Second, we urge for accountability, transparency of national policies for youth agricultural installation, because we don't want to see the increasing of inequalities among member states. So we ask for a strong commitment from the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the member states to include in their national strategic plans specific targeted measures on national level for young farmers. That's for the moment. I think I should pass the floor, and I remain available for other information.
Thank you very much, Pier Francesco. Next, I would like to invite Adélia to speak on behalf of CNAAL. Adélia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alisha. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to apologize if my sound is not in the best conditions. I'm speaking on behalf of CNA, National Confederation of Farmers, the Portuguese member of European Coordination Via Campesina. We held and we received more than 1 million of small-scale and family farmers last Monday, the 14th of June, in Lisbon during the informal meeting of the EU agricultural minister under the Portuguese presidency of the EU. A big initiative of CNAAL, the ECVC, and with the participation also from the member organizations from Spain and France. But we need to say that there are more mobilizations across Europe, like in France or Germany, and we have to go to the streets because, as the previous members of the ECVC already mentioned, this CAP is going on a way, is continuing its way of destruction of peasants all across Europe, in all the countries, and it was against this path that we demonstrated in Lisbon. Because as peasant organizations representing the millions of family farmers, the vast majority of farmers in Europe, we cannot remain silent because besides not benefiting from concrete policies that recognize our value, our importance, we also do not have the space on the debate that is monopolized by the large agribusiness. So we have the streets. It's the place where we need to make our voices, our demands, our rights to be heard. I would like to give some numbers regarding the Portuguese reality to show how CAP is maintaining its status quo all around our countries and keeping its agenda of favoring unconditionally the large agribusiness. For instance, in Portugal, since we entered in '86 in the European Union, then the ECC, 400,000 farms were lost, and mainly small and medium scale ones. Producer prices remain at levels than almost 20 years ago in some sectors. 40% of the farmers do not receive any direct payments from CAP, and 7% of the large farmers receive around 70% of CAP direct aid. So this is a great injustice because this large majority of farmers produce half of the production in Portugal, and they receive only 30% of the aid. So CAP is ignoring its social, but also the economic importance of these small-scale farmers. So as peasant organizations, we will never give up on fighting. We have this role of demanding for a fairer and a more solidary CAP, and go against this continuous path of the CAP. I won't want to take too much time, but I wanted to underline the role of our organizations in fighting for a better CAP, because we need to know that we might be small in scale or in size, but we are the majority, and we need our voice to be heard. With organized around our organizations, and the reasons are and the solutions for the problems the farmers, the consumers, the environment are facing. This solution is from our side.
Thank you so much, Adélia. Thank you for reminding us of more than 1,000 farmers protesting on the streets on Monday, a very important point. I would now like to open the floor up for questions. We received a few questions in advance, and I think maybe I will start with one of them, but I do encourage people to questions in the chat or to raise their hand if they want to take the floor and ask a question to any of our panel. So I think I'd like to start with a question on market regulation and why market regulation and the definition of the markets and prices is so important, especially in the context of achieving the goals of the CAP itself, but also the farm to fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy. And perhaps I can come to Andoni for a response on that to begin with. And then if any of the other panelists would like to add anything, please just raise your hand afterwards.
Gracias, Alisha. Si no tenemos medidas de regulación del mercado, ocurre lo que ya en este momento está ocurriendo. Los grandes operadores en la cadena, la industria o la distribución imponen continuamente precios cada vez más bajos, precios que no cubren los costes de una producción sostenible, de una producción como la que se está demandando en el por el conjunto de la sociedad europea y que nosotros reivindicamos, nosotros representamos como pequeños y medianos agricultores. Esa presión a la baja sobre los precios provoca directamente la destrucción de pequeños y medianos agricultores, impulsa los modelos más industriales, modelos cuya base de producción está hecha a base de la utilización del no respeto del medio ambiente, de los derechos laborales, produciendo cada vez más enclaves agroindustriales con las consecuencias que hasta ahora también hemos visto y se está padeciendo. Y en principio la Unión Europea en su conjunto plantea que esto no puede ser, ¿no? Cuando se plantea los objetivos de la PAC o los objetivos del Pacto Verde Europeo y la estrategia de la granja a la mesa, esos objetivos son incompatibles con la agricultura industrial. Sin embargo, nos encontramos que no tenemos instrumentos de control de la producción, de regulación de la producción, de que esa producción esté extendida en todas las regiones en Europa. Se está concentrando la producción cada vez en menos manos. Por otra parte, también las 5 mayores industrias agroalimentarias están controlando el 52% del mercado a nivel europeo. Esto es muy grave porque realmente acabamos condicionados y supeditados a los intereses y al poder de esa industria y distribución alimentaria que día a día está determinando la destrucción de los pequeños y medianos agricultores y ese impulso a la agricultura industrial. Necesitamos regulación del mercado para que haya unos precios que reconozcan una producción sostenible y que haya una remuneración justa a los agricultores.
Thank you very much, Andoni. I don't see any of the other panelists with their hand raised, so perhaps I'll move on to the next question. So we also received a question about the national strategic plans, and I know, Morgan, you touched on this, and perhaps Francesco too, so I think I'll come to both of you with this. But in the context of the national strategic plans, could you go a little deeper into why it's so important that at this late stage of the negotiations, some measures are made compulsory? Why is that so important for small-scale farmers?
Oui, je veux bien répondre là-dessus. Au niveau français, on a eu la présentation du plan stratégique national et il y a eu depuis beaucoup de protestations en France des paysans et des paysannes. Le problème, si on n'a pas un plafonnement obligatoire, si on n'a pas une aide aux petites fermes obligatoire, si on n'a pas un paiement redistributif obligatoire, c'est que les pays européens jouent la concurrence les uns contre les autres. Et donc, sans mesure obligatoire, il va y avoir une course au moins 10 ans où tous les pays vont aller vers le moins redistributif pour essayer d'avantager les gros acteurs de l'agro-industrie dans une guerre commerciale pour faire sur la compétitivité, pour faire baisser tous les prix. Et ça, il faut le dire, c'est une guerre qui anéantit les paysans et les paysannes dans tous les pays européens. Et donc, c'est pour ça que pour nous, c'est si important que lors du prochain trilogue, on se fixe des règles communes obligatoires ambitieuses. Parce que sans celles-là, on va aller à une guerre de tous contre tous, dont les principales victimes vont être les paysans et les paysannes européens. Merci.
Thank you very much, Morgan. And Pier, Francesco, I see your hand raised. Please take the floor.
Thank you. As Morgan said, the CAP policy, it really links all European producers. That's why we believe that there is a huge impact on also on national policies on other countries, both in European Union and outside European Union. That's why, for example, we think that the national strategic plans and national members of European Union should evaluate the impact of their agricultural policies, and in this context, the European Commission should definitely put a common framework on this. For example, regarding youth policies, there is no analysis in Europe of what are the needs and the context in where young farmers works in all the countries in the European Union. So also according, for example, the European Court of Auditors, CAP needs to previously assess the needs and then to the on the national level and the European Union level evaluate and put some common framework.
Thank you, Pier, Francesco. I think maybe your mic cut off a little bit there, but it's not a problem. I don't see any of the other speakers wishing to take the floor on this question, so I have one more question that I would like to ask that we received in advance, and if there's anybody, sorry, I see your hand, Adélia. You would like to take the floor?
Just,
Please take the floor, sorry.
Yeah, just to say that in the situation in Portugal, we are still a bit, quite a bit delayed on the definition of the national strategic plans, and only with the diagnosis and the SWOT analysis was made, and but still we are very far from having the measures needed for the family farming, because as the colleagues have mentioned before, without the definition of having sure that we are going to have the capping or the aggressive payments or the limitation of payments. I'm sorry if I'm missing the term in English. We won't correct or the unfairness of CAP, and also on the environmental decisions as well. Still are a lot to define and to know how it's going to be designed, because it's not enough to check a series of small practices that can be identified at compliance of certain practice. But if we do not value the whole model of production, the whole sustainable model, that like the family farming model, probably we are going through a huge mistake and benefiting these huge unsustainable farms that can put the check on the list of certain practices, but in the whole production system, they are not sustainable at all. So this is what is needed to be defined and fast.
Thank you very much for that, Adélia. So if none of the other panelists want to take the floor on that question, I will also ask one more question we received in advance, and that was regarding social conditionality. I think the importance of social conditionality has been highlighted throughout the pandemic. But one of the reasons that has been kind of used to argue against approving it in this round of negotiations is the bureaucracy that it will involve to apply it. And I just wondered what ECVC's take was on this. And I think I'm going to come to Attila for this question. So if you could touch on social conditionality a little bit, Attila, that would be great.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Alisha. Well, let's take it on this. The agricultural sector in the European Union is one of the sectors that provides employment to tens of millions of people. And what I also can relate to is that many of these people are coming from Eastern Europe and entering into a very dependent employment engagement with big agricultural industrial players from Europe, all over Europe. So in particular, large-scale industrial agriculture makes its profit through this steady reduction in labor costs and in conditions. So agricultural employment is a structural component, as I explained, and we see as a particular type of agricultural enterprise that is very large scale and in which capitalization is the basis for profit production, and the growing and the harvesting operations involve export and retailing and industrial processing. So this is where employment is mostly concentrated, and this is where the respecting of social conditionality should be also primarily controlled and implemented. So as I also mentioned, direct payments to farmers in the context of the subsidy systems are area-based, hectare-based. So the larger the amount of agricultural land, the more the company receives as support. While also we see that the concentration of the biggest part of these companies are dependent on large-scale employment. So we consider, and we see this as a very actual debate also in Europe now, that it's high time to stop giving public assistance, and in particular to give subsidies from the cap to an agricultural model that does not recognize the rights and nor the dignity of the workers. So we see that all public support measures must include social conditionality clause, and that needs to be ensured that they respect the fundamental labor and social rights of the migrant workers, of rural workers, wage workers. And ultimately, I just want to touch a little bit also what my colleague Andoni was outlining, that it's very important that we have good market regulations and fair prices for farmers, because these are key in making sure that social conditionality can be applied, because they would remove the pressure of producing ever cheaper prices, and the prices are getting lower and lower, and then the stress is getting higher and higher. So I hope I made a very good parallel. I think the bureaucracy was already dismantled by many of the debates that have been ongoing in the CAP.
Thank you very much, Attila. So I would just like to invite now anybody who's with us who would like to ask any questions to raise their hand, to put in the chat. I think that we've had a very rich debate already. If there are any other questions that we would like to pose to our speaker, now is the moment. And if not, we can close. I see Emmanuel has raised his hand.
Oui, bonjour. Donc, je suis membre du mouvement agricole paysan, donc en Belgique, en région wallonne, et j'avais des questions concernant les conditionnalités environnementales. Parce que quelque part, c'est un peu schizophrénique. Enfin, d'après ce que je vois, c'est un peu schizophrénique. Il y a des mesures d'accompagnement en dehors du système, et je me posais quand même la question de l'opportunité d'imposer des normes environnementales qui va vraiment plus vers l'agroécologie, c'est-à-dire que cette politique agricole commune qui favorise évidemment des monocultures sur très grande échelle sont souvent incompatibles avec le maillage vert, le bocage, et après on donne des primes par exemple à l'installation de haies. Mais des conditionnalités où on impose quand même un minimum de couverture arbustive ne favoriserait-elle pas l'agroécologie, justement les petites fermes, les moyennes fermes, les méthodes agroécologiques? Donc ce serait peut-être une possibilité pour imposer des normes qui aillent contre ces monocultures sur grande échelle. Aussi, un étonnement que j'ai par rapport aux conditionnalités, je ne comprends pas comment on puisse attribuer des subsides si importants pour l'élevage industriel, pour le hors-sol, pour favoriser la concentration de vaches, de poules, de porcs qui vont être réexportés par la suite. Je ne comprends pas non plus ce double discours quelque part de l'autonomie de la condition animale, de l'autonomie fourragère, alors qu'on s'en écarte complètement. Et bon, voilà, et donc je suis absolument la position de la Confédération paysanne sur le fait que, en fait, c'est une espèce de compensation pour aider toujours l'agro-industrie, la transformation d'aliments, la grande distribution à avoir des prix très très bon marché. Et quelque part, c'est assez hypocrite parce que d'un côté, c'est une compensation, on sacrifie nos agriculteurs pour avoir favorisé nos exportations dans d'autres domaines, dans d'autres pays. Merci et donc merci de m'avoir écouté.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I think perhaps the best person to answer this is Morgan, if you want to take the floor, Morgan.
Bah oui, merci pour la question. Enfin, voilà, nous aussi, à ECVC, on est très sceptiques sur la capacité de cette PAC actuelle à faire vraiment changer la donne. Et on voit bien que les politiques européennes sont contradictoires les unes avec les autres. Il y a un plan biodiversité, il y a un plan pour la réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, il y a le pacte vert de façon générale, des objectifs pour réduire la consommation de pesticides. Quand on pose la question dans les réunions avec la DG Envie sur les questions environnementales, ils nous disent que ça va être réglé dans le cadre de la PAC. Et quand on regarde le cadre de la PAC, il n'y a aucun outil qui peut permettre de commencer à aller vers, à vraiment soutenir le changement de pratique des agriculteurs, des agricultrices vers plus d'agroécologie. Et encore une fois, sur ces questions-là, les questions commerciales et de régulation de marché sont au moins aussi essentielles que les questions de distribution de paiement. Je vais donner un exemple très concret. En France, il y a eu la volonté, il y a 3 ans, d'interdire les néonicotinoïdes. Mais en parallèle, il y a eu une dérégulation du marché du sucre et les prix du sucre ont fortement baissé. Et les producteurs de betteraves sucrières en France se sont retrouvés en situation économique difficile. Et du coup, alors on connaît les alternatives techniques, mais les alternatives techniques supposent un prix un petit peu plus élevé. Et donc, ça n'a pas fonctionné. Et donc, le gouvernement a dû faire machine arrière et réautoriser les néonicotinoïdes, dont on sait qu'ils ont des conséquences terribles, à la fois pour l'environnement, pour les abeilles, mais aussi pour la santé, et je le redis, notamment pour la santé des paysans et des paysannes qui sont piégés dans l'utilisation de ces pesticides, piégés par les conditions économiques. Donc, si on ne protège pas notre agriculture et si on n'accorde pas des prix justes qui couvrent les coûts de production d'une production durable, une production écologique, on n'y arrivera pas. Et d'ailleurs, nous, on considère que ce qui s'est passé au dernier trilogue, où ils n'ont pas réussi à trouver un accord, c'est notamment parce qu'ils sont face à ces contradictions-là. Frans Timmermans, à un moment, a été obligé de dire « il n'y a rien dans cette PAC qui permet que j'aboutisse sur le pacte vert sur lequel je me suis engagée ». Donc, eux-mêmes le reconnaissent. Et donc, nous, on considère qu'il faut aller jusqu'au… il faut considérer cette contradiction et il faut sérieusement améliorer la PAC pour faire en sorte qu'on réussisse réellement à appliquer les objectifs que l'Union européenne elle-même s'est fixés. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Morgan. I see Pier Francesco has his hand raised, and I just wanted to check if Andoni wanted to speak because you had your mic open before, Andoni. If not, that's not a problem. So I'll give the floor to Pier Francesco, and if he wants to speak afterwards, Andoni.
Perfect. I just want to add a small reflection on that because young farmers are often linked with technological solutions in agriculture. So the risk for the new CAP is that new technological solutions are seen as environmental friendly, environmental solution. We believe that we have to start from the analysis of new installations and new entrants in agriculture that are often characterized by a small economic size and by a small investment. So the precision farming and high-tech farming, we believe that it's a new form of greenwashing and greening that no help the installation of new farmers and the existing one. And then we advocate for support of really environmental friendly measures that are not related to investment capital, but more to agroecological practices that anyone could manage on our own farm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pier Francesco. So I would just like to invite one more time if there's any questions, please let, I think we have one journalist who's just joining us now. But yes, if there are any final questions, please raise your hand, let me know in the chat. Welcome, Florence, I see you've just joined us. We were just asking if there's any final questions or comments, and if not, we can close. I'll just leave it for a moment in case there's anybody typing in the chat. And I see Andoni has raised his hand, so in the meantime, Andoni, please take the floor.
Sí, volver a insistir en una cuestión importante. Nosotros compartimos y defendemos los objetivos que se marcan en la PAC, los objetivos del Pacto Verde Europeo con las estrategias de la Granja a la Mesa y biodiversidad. Compartimos esos objetivos y los defendemos. Además, porque tenemos claro que los representamos. Por una parte, los pequeños y medianos agricultores y la agricultura que en sí mismos representamos, respondemos a esos objetivos. Pero realmente, si no se toman medidas donde se priorice, se deje claro este modelo y se busque este modelo con medidas de regulación del mercado, con apoyos, con unos precios, si no es todo esto, realmente si no se abordan las contradicciones mismas que está teniendo la Unión Europea entre plantear estos objetivos y al mismo tiempo colocarnos en la desregulación de los mercados y en el poder que se le da a la industria, la distribución y lo que suponen los mercados globalizados, si no se aborda debidamente todo esto, realmente esos objetivos son imposibles de cumplir. No podemos continuamente tener menores precios de producción, precios que no cubren los costes y unas ayudas que son las mismas o incluso menores y encima sometidas a no tener limitaciones o una redistribución en favor de un modelo sostenible de agricultura. Por lo tanto, necesitamos medidas profundas y poner en el centro la agricultura sostenible y la agricultura que representan los pequeños y medianos agricultores. Si no es esto, esta PAC fracasará y además fracasarán los objetivos que se plantean en el Pacto Verde Europeo en las estrategias de la granja y la mesa y biodiversidad.
Thank you very much, Andoni. I think we have just over 5 minutes left, and I think I've just received a question through the chat. Oh, no, sorry. But I think we have just over 5 minutes left. And I'm trying to, I have a question from Marta, I think, on how could the CAP facilitate land access for new peasants, for peasant farmers, sorry. So how could the new CAP facilitate land access for peasant farmers? And I think perhaps this is a question for Attila. And if Morgan afterwards you want to give an opinion also, feel free. So Attila, take the floor.
Thank you. It's a very valid question, no? Because access to land is one of the highest ranking issues of newcomers and young farmers, so the need for access to land. And certainly the CAP although it does not have a direct effect over land, no, because land is of national competence, still the cap influences a lot the use of land and access to land through the way subsidies are being distributed, as I was saying, on an area-based schemes, so per hectare-based schemes mostly. So first of all, we need to get rid of this. We cannot support land concentration through subsidies anymore, because land concentration leaves land scarcity and, of course, less land for young farmers and new entrants. So we do need to also, as my colleagues were saying, to redirect support towards young farmers so that they can use that support to access land. Also, the cap to other redistributive payments should very much target not just the 2% from that, but much more towards young farmers so that they can be capacitated to access land. So you see, these are just a couple of quick measures that I was saying, but the cap also needs to acknowledge that the land concentration that is happening until now, it's disastrous for farming, and also, better yet, that the way the subsidies have been causing a lot of fraudulence, have been causing a lot of corruption, and we have very well documented cases of oligarchies and political figures that were hijacking land for their own interests. So this is all in the detriment of the young farmers. And maybe my colleagues can complete also with some other measures.
Thank you very much, Attila. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to take the floor. I don't see any hand raised. Morgan? Yes, great, thank you.
C'est évident que la PAC fondée sur le nombre d'hectares, le fait que les paiements soient distribués en fonction du nombre d'hectares, conduit à la concentration foncière en Europe. Plus on a d'hectares, plus on a d'argent, et donc il faut accumuler les hectares. Or, il est aussi évident que si on veut aller vers une transformation à la fois agroécologique de l'agriculture européenne, mais aussi vers une agriculture qui fournisse plus d'emplois, qui soit plus sociale, on a besoin d'un partage plus juste des terres. Et donc, cette PAC-là, on l'a dit, c'est pas la nôtre. Nous, notre perspective pour une PAC vraiment plus juste, elle serait basée sur les actifs, sur les paysans et paysannes qui travaillent. Et c'est ça l'essentiel. Et donc, mais là, dans le cadre actuel, on essaye de grappiller pour que, comme ça a été dit au début, ce soit le moins pire possible. Mais la PAC qu'on souhaite, une PAC qui permettrait de mieux redistribuer les ressources agricoles et notamment les terres, elle devrait ne plus être basée sur le nombre d'hectares, mais sur le travail des gens qui sont réellement, qui travaillent dans les champs, les paysans, les paysannes, les travailleurs agricoles, voilà.
Thank you very much, Morgan. I think perhaps with that we can close. We only have a couple of minutes left anyway. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of those who have joined us, and also a big thank you to our interpreters who are incredible and who allow the voices of peasants to really be heard in their own language. I will just offer the floor one more time to any of the panelists who wish to make a final closing remark, and if not, we will close there. So any final words before we leave? No, I see Andoni with his mic open. I didn't know if you wanted to speak, but that's fine. Thank you very much, everybody, for being with us, and have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Merci, au revoir.